Hey, thanks for joining us for the last 7 days. I'm Brian Spellman.
And I'm Andrew Sparrow.
Today is Friday, November the 3rd, and we're about to dive into talking about the news over the last week and how it impacts our worlds of PLM, CAD, MES, MOM, MFG, and basically all the TLAs. First off, we're going to dive into fly into some aerospace.
RS.
Did I
just
hear you
trigger
instead of
happy
saying
there.
ready, set, go? Did you just say RSG? Is that what I heard?
Why not? Why not? Let's
So
keep
a
those
new
acronyms rolling.
for all of those who have lived in this, I guess, this world of acronyms, I guess RSG is a new one for you. I like that, Andrew.
There you go. Thanks.
Starlink achieves a cash flow break even, says SpaceX CEO Elon Musk. Starlink has now earned the title for the most satellites in space. By next year, it's going to have launched more satellites than all other Earth satellite launches combined in all of history. And they've posted a six-fold surge in revenue to 1.4 billion, which is less than the target, but still pretty impressive that Starlink is now no longer losing money.
That I've got to say, cash flow break even for a business such as that is pretty amazing. I've got to say, because I remember it was 2019, they pushed up, I think, 60 satellites in a batch. Etc.
Yep.
I mean, amazing to think the volumes, the scale, the expense they've incurred in putting this business up and running. I mean, what's it all about? How could any business of that scale and complexity achieve cash flow in that break even in that period of time?
Yeah, it's the reusability that they've used for these rockets, and the fact that the end of life planning of what happened. We talked about last week about how there might be falling rocket parts too, but in general, the reuse or the idea of what happens at the end of life of them is neat as well. But this is a pretty good lesson in economies of scale. I mean, the number of satellites, it's a lot of satellites up there. This has been fascinating to watch.
Yep. You've got to put it down to Elon. He's talked about it for a few years of kind of first principles, which is over the years that the whole NASA thing was a case of outsource, pass it out. So you've got margin upon margin upon margin built into that business model. What he's done is stripped all those margins away, got it back to its most basic level, and he's kept everything vertically integrated, similar to what he does with Tesla. Let's be honest,
Yep.
that keeps the prices down. He's reusing rockets. He's doing in-house manufacturing, which I've touched on. It's lean operations as well. He's got his own launch capabilities. I mean, incredible business model that he's put together. Very difficult.
And apparently some pretty good marketing.
It's Elon. He's got brand recognition, everything going for him. Great job. Next up, Lufthansa is to order 40 small short haul planes, 40 single aisle planes. I mean, this just continues the whole aviation growth once again as we've come out of the pandemic. Lufthansa wants to order 40 small short haul planes, considering Airbus A220s and the Embraer. They're also looking to order 40 single aisle planes, considering for that Airbus's A320 and Boeing's 737 MAX.
You know, when you say 40 planes, well, 80 planes total here, that sounds like 80 sounds like a small number sometimes, but when we're talking about planes, I mean, that's big. There's a lot of manufacturing that's going to be involved here and a lot of money that's going to be spent.
Absolutely. Yeah. Good signs.
A German startup company is now planning on launching rockets from Norway, which is going to be a first for Europe. The startup ISAR Aerospace is going to launch these test rockets into space. Going to test launch rockets into space next year. It's going to give Europe its first spaceport for orbital missions called Andøya Spaceport, which is on an island off of Norway, ISAR. And it's a great quote about this. The ISAR CEO said that Europe can literally not launch a single satellite on its own. So for the past, they've always been looking at trying to partner with NASA, with SpaceX, with everything else to get some stuff into space. So this is actually really big for Europe. And because their infrastructure for launch is the core bottleneck in that region, they're trying to launch 15 missions a year from Andoya at a cost of 10 to 12 million.
Interesting crew, ISAR. I watched them since inception. I remember they purchased SolidWorks, which is fascinating, which is an amazing CAD tool. Don't get me wrong, but you wouldn't necessarily expect that space technology is using a CAD tool such as SolidWorks. So it's amazing how well it does and its scalability. But I remember when they started, they said, we're going to compete with SpaceX and the whole Starlink thing, which we mentioned earlier on. But that's a big statement to make. And obviously the volumes they're talking about are different to what SpaceX Starlink is doing. But one thing's for sure, to even hope to compete, what they're doing with their CAD, their PLM, their MES-MOM is going to have to stand up at similar levels from a digitalization, automation perspective. Very complex. Good for them.
Yeah.
So next up, US blacklists a dozen Russian firms over drone work. Apparently, the Russian military has been buying in these drones, and unfortunately, it looks like a few of us in the US have been supplying those parts to those drones, which of course they're then going to come back and bite us. So they blacklisted that and said no more. You can't do any more. Quite right too.
All right.
Next up, I think we're going automotive, aren't we?
We're going to drive into some automotive.
Yeah. So first up, Toyota plans to trial new EV pickup in Thailand. Toyota engineers are working on adapting its electric pickups to local conditions and build up EV R&D capabilities in Thailand, which is one of Toyota's 5 global R&D centers already. Its launch in Thailand would mark a fresh attempt by Toyota to counter the mounting Chinese competition. Thereafter, its sales of its BZ4X electric SUV, which began last year and would dwarfing the sales of rivals, including BYD and Great Wall Motors. So Chinese electric vehicle makers are rapidly gaining market share, essentially in Thailand, and have pledged some $1.5 billion of investment for new manufacturing facilities. For me, in that product lifecycle manufacturing world, this is all about keeping our costs down for Toyota so that you can compete with the Chinese economies of scale. And to do your costs down, you need PLM, you need good MES-MOM solutions. Take a shot at it, Brian. What do you think?
Well, this is interesting because the pickup truck market is pretty huge to Thailand's auto market. It accounted for almost half of all the vehicle sales last year. And Toyota is testing all these EV pickups for use as basically a lot of pickups there have been modified into taxis. And so having an EV pickup taxi is going to be a huge thing, which is a little different use than we tend to see for pickups in other markets, especially over here in America. So it's taking this traditional idea of what are the market for what we think of what pickups are going to be used for and using them as taxis, which is apparently a big thing over in Thailand already. But EVs are going to change that a bit because we've already seen how EVs have changed what's happening with, the Uber driving and stuff here for Tesla, for EVs, people using less gas, obviously. So the economies of scale you've been talking about are going to really play into effect here because it's a huge market for this over in Thailand.
You bet. Yeah.
Speaking of huge markets, Ferrari is now deploying an electronic device testing technique that's traditionally been used in other industries in order to try to speed the electric vehicle car development. Ferrari is relying on a technique called hardware in the loop, HIP, which simulates the behaviors of products under development in different conditions. It's traditionally been used for developing smartphones and computers. And I believe Ferrari is the first company, and don't quote me on this, but I believe, to use this technique for the accelerating development and testing for an electric car. They're expecting their first fully electric car in 2025, which is pretty impressive for a sports car that's going to be electric. The chief executive of Ferrari said that it took us some time to get prepared, but thanks to this technique, we've already solved a few problems in our hybrid models that normally come up in a later stage of development. So it's fascinating to watch the borrowing basically proven techniques from other industries and moving this, across verticals is a fascinating thing for me to see in this sector.
Yeah, yeah. Cross fertilization of best practices, industry to industry, really, really good stuff. Next up, Nikola. Nikola has received more orders for its fuel cell truck, despite posting wider losses. Nikola showed progress in its shift to hydrogen fuel cell trucks on Thursday, saying it secured a 277 non-binding order, even after third quarter recalls due to battery fires. The company said the hydrogen fuel truck orders would outpace its manufacturing capacity this year. Where have I heard that before? Let's come back to that. In August, they recorded 209 battery-powered electric trucks that it had delivered and suspended sales. Despite the recall, Nikola said it received orders for 47 Tree battery electric trucks. So orders are outpacing manufacturing. We're not talking about high volumes here, but this is consistent, isn't it, across the EV new tech startup organizations. The consistent bottlenecks in engineering, the late start to get into manufacturing at scale, the then price and cost pressures to possibly go out and buy the wrong mess mom that is not helping your scalability, not maintaining your quality, etc. We've heard it before, and I think it comes back again is focus more on the manufacturing at scale. It's what Elon is saying, and he's said time and time again. Sounds like Nikola may have some similar issues, but hey, maybe I'm wrong. I'd love to hear what other reasons there are.
I think their cost of repair was, for this recall was something north of 60 million. So, and that's, the re-engineering and validating and retrofitting everything seems to be a direct result of maybe not, when companies don't plan, like you're talking about, correct. And of course you can't plan for everything, but when they don't plan correctly in some of these things, these costs of re-engineering and recall repairs are huge. And we know that automotive has so many recalls already. So it seems like a huge area for improvement there for all the automotive companies.
Absolutely. Manufacturing at scale and quality of manufacturing as well to avoid recalls. Exactly right. You bet. Good.
And speaking of your manufacturing, I'm pretty sure that we have some news about the manufacturing orders surging this past month. So let's head into technology and manufacturing.
So US factory orders surge in September. Welcome, Joseph.
Hey. Hello, guys. How are you doing?
Doing good. So US factory orders surged in September. New orders for US-made goods increased more than expected, boosted by strong demand for computers and electronics, but high borrowing costs remain a bit of a challenge for those manufacturers. A few quick stats for you. Factory orders jumped 2.8% in August. Spending surged in the third quarter. Computer electronic orders rose by 1%. Civilian aircraft orders rebounded by 92.5%. And there's many more out there as well. And this is what I've been saying. We need to gear up manufacturing. The skills we know have been depleted in North America over the many years of offshoring. And so we have to fix those. I know we're going to talk robotics, we're talking automation, we're talking digitalization, all of these things. The only way is to go that Industry 4 route. Welcome,
one
Joseph.
thing we're definitely seeing is that we're not having any slowdown in the need for manufacturing to be an efficient, safe, and good process. I got a question for both of you here. What do all of these have in common? The news that Biden fell asleep during a moment of silence for Maui wildfire victims, that COVID-19 is being orchestrated by the Democratic Party ahead of the election, that NBA players' obituary called him useless, and that a few people are resigning or dying that aren't actually true.
They're all true.
The answer is that all of these things were published by Microsoft on MSN's homepage, which is one of the world's most trafficked websites. Millions of folks get their news from there. And it's happening because the reliance on AI and automation have actually caused unverified news, conspiracies, and a lot more things that you might find on the corners of the web to start being posted on basically a major and trusted news site.
That's really interesting. Yesterday, I was on my cell. I got the Microsoft News, and the headline said, "Putin has died."
And that's not true, right? He's not actually.
I think it would have been all over the news, let's be honest. So again, that's another example of AI and fake truth and all that kind of stuff. Amazing.
Yeah, they had in 2018, more than 800 editors were in charge of selecting and curating the news that was shown. But a lot of those reported being laid off over the past 5 years and being replaced by automation. So AI and automation have been causing some interesting things with what's just being posted on the news, which I guess brings us back to that old adage of don't trust everything you see on the internet.
Yeah, you bet. Next up, Fictiv. So we're going to Mexico, aren't we? Because Joseph's here. So Fictiv, an operating system for custom manufacturing and manufacturing services, has added Mexico to its global network of manufacturing partners. Number one. Number two, if I pronounce this right, even though I think Joseph will correct me, Baluf announced the opening of its new production facility in Aguascalientes, not bad, Mexico. The new smart factory will enable the sensor and automation company to achieve its planned growth while creating resilient supply chains. The company is regionalizing its supply chain with a $53 million investment.
Did he pronounce that right, Joseph?
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
I think everybody. Aguascalientes or
Aguascalientes, señor.
Okay, there you go. Better, much better.
No, really, really good. I would like to make a comment over here because Baluf, I don't know, guys, if you are aware about it, but Baluf is one of the bigger companies or brands right here for automation products, right? When you're talking about IoT in the manufacturing plants, Baluf is one of the brands really good, right? With PLCs, with HMIs, with sensors, with different things, because they have all the catalog, the products available to connect everything. And normally you have the option to connect with other brands. So it's really good, to collect the data in the lines of production in different industries. Doesn't matter which one, but is very friendly, to collect the data and eventually monitor everything or reporting or the different decisions that you want to have or take with the data collected. So yeah, that's a huge announcement, I guess.
Yeah, right. 53 million is not a small chunk of change there.
Yeah, exactly, guys. So that brings me, guys, to my news that I have for this week. So the last one, I attended the SMTA. Mm-hmm. The SMTA is a big trade show that we have in Mexico, we have in the US also, and we have in other countries, right? But what is happening over here with the trade shows? All the producers or the EMS, which is electronic manufacturing services companies, meet together in this trade show to talk about the trends, to show what is happening with the new equipment, to manufacture PCBs and different products in the electronic world. So I was attending this trade show and I met with different companies. I can mention some names like Sanmina, Flex, Continental over here, Jabil. So a lot of brands, right? And it's very interesting how they are looking for different technologies right now to simulate and connect everything. So years ago, they
simulate manufacturing or simulate product?
Both.
Process. Okay.
Both. Because before to manufacture, you need to simulate, right? So you need to know what's going to happen because it's huge and big volumes of the production. Mm-hmm. So quality errors over here, you're gonna produce a lot of scrap and a lot of red numbers, right? So it's very interesting to have the simulation for everything end to end. And starting the process with SMT, where you put all the components, is big automation right there. But also in the final of the process, which is backend. In backend, you assembly all the, you can figure out like, if you are producing a cell phone, you are putting all the big hardware or pieces to the cell phone, right? But in the first stage of the process is a critical one when you're producing the small pieces, right? What is the electronics, or putting everything together and connecting everything.
It seems
Yeah.
like every time we're talking about a lot of manufacturing happening, I guess for those who don't know, Joseph's joining us from Mexico here. And so when he said over here, he means Mexico. And there's a lot of manufacturing. We keep having news of new opening down in Mexico. But I think that brings us to, what happens with once stuff's made there, where does it go? Because it's not all being consumed in Mexico. So I guess the border logistics between, well, let's say Texas and Mexico, as far as products go, what's happening with that?
Well, all the merchandising, all the products, everything that is producing right here in Mexico in different sites, have to go to other places, right? So the big market that we have globally is the US. And yeah, you're right, Brian, when you are mentioning Texas and also Nuevo León, which is the border that you have right there.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, the Mexico is proposing to put a corridor for logistics and to create and have an agile process to put all the merchandising in the other side. You know about this triangle in Texas, right? About San Antonio, Dallas. Well, you have between Dallas and San Antonio, Austin, right? But also Houston, receiving all the logistics coming from normally from Asia, right? But also you have all the importings coming from Mexico. So the idea with this corridor, to put in the border, with Nuevo León, in the zone of Nuevo Laredo, which is the small city, is trying to connect Monterrey, Nuevo Laredo, and eventually San Antonio, right? So right there is the idea. For Texas, gonna grow a lot. You know how big is their economy, right? With Houston receiving all the importings, but also the customs that they gonna have with the importings coming from Mexico, gonna be a really powerful improvement, to accelerate the economy again. So
yeah, that's going to be huge with all the manufacturing that is coming to Mexico. I mean, we've announced several new plans for huge manufacturing that's happening down there over these past couple episodes, and it's going to change a lot. I think that the biggest factor is a lot of companies. What was it? One of the Chinese companies for EVs was talking about trying to manufacture, and they're investing a lot of money to manufacture things down there because it's a little easier to import from Mexico to the US than to import a car from China to the US. And so there's some, it's going to be huge for these things happening, especially with the corridor there. But then the regulations that are happening with the border logistics, with government regulations, all of this will be a huge factor that is going to have to be considered. Yeah, I think it's interesting stuff, but it's going to be, I think Mexico is going to become more and more of a player in this particular manufacturing sector here for electronics, for cars, for everything.
It plays to the usual that we see every day now as we're in Mexico, is faster, cheaper, as good as China or further offshore. So it's an emerging economy. So historically, what's happened when you get a problem, throw more people at it. But where we're getting to now is to get faster, to get better, to get cheaper. You can't just throw people at it. You've got to throw digitalization at it. So it's a consistent thing. And I think, given that you Texans tend to be pretty demanding, the regulations the regulations, the certifications, the whole traceability and reporting is going to have to step up with these cross-border controls going in place.
Yeah, speaking of throwing people at a problem and speaking of border logistics, let's dive into people and culture. And now we're in our exciting people and culture section with Greg. Greg, what news have you brought for us today?
Hey, Brian. Hey, Andrew. Exciting news. I don't know if this is related to PLM at all, unless we're talking about how music is made. But the Beatles came out with supposedly their last song this week, which is, I think it's exciting for them. I don't know how many of us are Beatles
The
fans.
last song.
Last song. Yes. Yeah.
This is news that makes Andrew look at that grin on his face there. He's very excited about apparently the last song for the, not in a, oh no, it's a good song. You're excited about it being the last song.
Like, I'm a fan of the Beatles, but when you kind of grow up with it and it's constant, yeah, it's good to see they've had their time and the last one's come out, or the last one. Yeah.
I was going to say that I would be the first to poo-poo on the Beatles, but it sounds like Andrew beat me to that. But I'm excited for them. I'm excited for them this week. They're phenomenal songwriters. They ripped the music. Anyways, from a video. We don't have to go too far into it, but I think it's pretty exciting. In other news, we, this week there was a Wisconsin iron foundry that was fined over $230,000 after 2 employees suffered injuries that resulted in amputation fingertips within an 11-day period. Surprisingly, this is not the first time that an incident has been cited at the foundry, at the iron foundry here from OSHA. It sounds like there was some proper machine guarding and energy control procedures that I don't know if they weren't.
So what exactly happened?
Yeah, so one was trying to remove a jammed part, and then one was caught in between a part and a stand grinding wheel.
Ooh,
right. Yeah. Fixable. I mean, obviously, there's no correcting a human's error. Probably you can't control them every second of every day, but for me, when you start on the whole manufacturing, you get your employee health and safety standards in place. One of the first things, compliance issues, lean manufacturing issues, get all those things figured out. So that's one factor. The other thing is, if you're going to be caught between a part and a standing grinding wheel, to me, you should be simulating that performance of the factory. You should be getting your factory layout done, get your ergonomic simulation in place so that you're actually catching those things potentially going to happen before you even put those lines in place. I mean, that to me is what we tend to look at these days, get it done so everybody's safe and secure.
Yeah.
Technology's big. It's always exciting to see, and I think it's one of those things we got to step back and say, okay, what's the technology that we can put in place to help prevent these things moving forward? So 2 in 11 days is not a strong record, especially since they had issues back in 2021 and 2019.
Yeah.
So sounds like every 2 years something's happening. Yeah. The strike, the UAW strike, and Andrew, I promise this is the last time that I will ever mention the UAW strike on a live show, but the strike is over. And I think that's definitely something that's exciting to note.
It's good news.
Yes. Yep. There's meetings this week. They're kind of finalizing a couple of paperwork. I think the ink is still drying, but originally they had requested, union members had requested a 40% increase in wages. They're getting a 25% increase over the next couple of years, starting with an initial immediate increase of 11%. It eliminated some lower pay tiers for workers in certain parts of operations. There's a couple different things, converting a lot of the temporary workers that are in plants right now to full-time status, higher pay for temps, the right to go on strike over plant closures, which was a big thing for the union to get approval to go on strike over plant closures, especially as we're moving into part of the industry. We're going to be changing up, building new manufacturing plants, battery manufacturing plants, all sorts of stuff, EV vehicles, and I think those will relocate as well. So as they're closing
changes, things that are affecting just the U.S. companies that were involved in the strike, are you seeing, is the news talking about other companies as well?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think that Toyota has already announced that they are increasing their wages just to stay competitive
Yeah.
with GM, Ford, and Stellantis. So we're definitely going to see those in line. I think analysts are saying from an impact perspective that the higher labor costs are at least costing the big three at a minimum $800 million, potentially over $1 billion. I've seen up to $1.5 billion. It depends on the source that you're reading, right? But to put those numbers in perspective, that's per year per company. To put those numbers in perspective, the first 3 quarters of 2023, Ford had made, I think, 130 million in revenue, and 5 billion of that was profit. So this is definitely going to make a massive impact to the profits that they're seeing.
Yeah. Are we going to see increases in car cost as a result?
You know, I think we'll see. We could see those. I think it's more likely that GM, Stellantis, even Toyota, with raising their prices, are going to be looking at how do we reduce cost internally, expense reductions. How do we increase efficiencies? Obviously, robotics and automation are a huge part of the conversation, and how we can increase that.
Yep.
I don't know. It's like, will competitors be able to sell at a lower cost? Probably not, right? With Toyota already raising their cost.
It's tricky. These OEMs are absolute masters at keeping their costs down on a traditional automotive. Now they've got this battery introduced. Battery is the big one. I think it takes up 30% plus of the cost of a vehicle versus an ICE, which is much, much lower. The big one is, how do they get the cost of those batteries down? That's the one.
Yeah. And I do think the biggest impact is going to be those investments into their EV goals and ambitions, right? As they're leaning into competing with Tesla and Toyota, who are already leaning forward in that. This is definitely going to make an impact over the next decade, for sure.
And speaking of batteries and energy, I think there's something we read about a bunch of new energy products being announced.
Yeah, no, definitely. So last year, mid 2022, we had the Inflation Reduction Act that took place. Since that was rolled out, there have been 210 major energy projects announced. 58% of those energy projects are EV related, electric vehicle related, and so expected over the next couple years. And this is, a career thought for those of us that are in the field, expected to support over 187,000 different jobs for 5 years in a lot of different sectors, right? I think 48,000 of those jobs are going to be in battery storage, and 35,000 is going to be in solar. And so biggest thing though is I would expect new warehouses to be built, and I don't know where those are going to be built. I don't know if
where are the warehouses?
Yeah, where are the warehouses? That's that can be the tagline for today.
You said the Inflation Reduction Act took place in 2022, which isn't that long ago. But what is the IRA?
Yeah, it's basically a new law that aims at a couple different things, really to curb inflation, right? Giving American citizens a stronger wallet, but reducing federal government budget deficit, lowering prescription drug prices are part of it. A major, massive piece of it is investing into domestic energy production while also promoting clean energy. And so obviously EV is a huge portion of that. Yeah.
Sounds like a good thing on the surface. We'll see what happens. But that's, I mean, the 210 major projects is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So you deal a lot with people, right? And the efficiency of how folks are in the workplace. And I think we keep hearing about robots coming into this world of factories. And you mentioned robotics earlier.
Yeah.
Is there the study I think you talked about earlier of what's happening with robotics in the workplace?
Yeah. Yep. There is a study that came out in the scientific journal Frontiers in Robotics and AI, right? But basically, robots are supposed to help us be more efficient, right? At the end of the day, that's the goal of them. There is a study that is that's coming out and saying there might be a couple gaps in that theory, and this is something that we're going to have to lean into figuring out moving forward. But the study basically says humans who work with robots may actually be more likely to slack off while on the job. And so, go for it.
Oh, I'll just react to that. That's surprising. Like humans may be more likely to slack off with robots. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I mean, we've all been there, right? You guys remember group projects back in college, right? Where there's one group member would get stuck doing the brunt of the work. While group projects can motivate people to perform, they can enable other people to hide behind the work of others. And so in this study, what happened was researchers asked participants to hunt down defects in circuit boards, right? Just like, hey, list out, here's a circuit board, find all the defects, let me know what they are. Half of them were told that the circuit boards were already inspected by robots. The other half had said the boards had not been inspected. What ended up happening is participants who believed they had a robot counterpart spotted less errors in the parts despite spending just as much time on the task. Yep.
That sounds almost like a study in psychology as well. That's interesting.
Yeah, because part of the study was basically saying, hey, here's you're spending just as much time on the task. You feel just as responsible for the task, and you feel just as satisfied with your work, but you're finding less errors because you think that a robot is probably finding them better. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Joseph, what's to say about robots and your thoughts on this here?
Well, Ryan, you read my mind to put me in the show, because I have a comment over here. So it's interesting how the robots are working right now with the humans and the operators. What happened over here, Greg, and I think is gonna be really related to people and culture, right? Because you need to have a director or the leadership very aligned with the thing that you want to realize. So, for example, what is happening right now in different industries, not only with, you mentioned circuit boards, and I like to talk about PCBs, is the same. But also in other industries, you over-automate a process. And that is a risk that you have in the line, because you're trying to put technology where it's not needed. Probably you can solve a problem with sensors, with vision, with other kind of things. But putting a robot gonna be overwhelmed for everybody, and gonna be over automation and gonna stress everything. Gonna put a lot of risk in your process. And yeah, so that's why it's very interesting when you bring a supplier or you have your own team of automation in your plant to analyze everything. Is very important. And if you bring a supplier, please bring a really experienced supplier to do it, because a supplier all the time gonna try to put the big elephant right there, right? But probably it's not needed to put all of this automation for a simple, piece of cake, right?
There's a good balance between the right amount of automation, how it works with people, and it really all goes back to the idea. I think, Greg, you mentioned in the beginning that we want robots were here, and these processes of automations in general are here to help make things easier and more efficient for us. But there's some point that maybe they actually make things more complicated and reduce the ability of people to be efficient. Yeah, it's pretty interesting stuff.
You took the words right out of my mouth, right? It sounds like AI and automation can be as helpful as it can be hurtful, right? Just in this show, we've talked about Microsoft and their articles, Beatles in the last song, the study that we're talking about with robots. I think we're going to have to be careful with AI and automation moving forward. If there's a career tip that any of us should take from this, it's don't overlook the human aspect of working with robots and automated processes, because there's still an extremely important piece, whether it's the psychology of it or just the human touch, that's really going to be important moving forward.
I think that's a great place to end our show today, is the idea of don't overlook the human aspect. That was a great summary, Greg. Everybody, thanks for joining us today, and we will see you all next week.
See you next week.
Thank you.